Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post with me, Ghadi Francis, our weekly show from this region that I call home. Our top story today is about the recent violence in Gaza. Israel and Gaza almost went into a full-blown war. They exchanged fire for 3 days. Buildings were flattened, innocent civilians were killed, and now there is a fragile ceasefire in place. So what kicked off this dangerous flare-up? Was this a gamble by the Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid to win the elections? We tell you more.
I was reciting the last prayers. I didn't expect to live until the moment they rescued me.
3 days of intense fighting. "46 people killed. 15 children dead. Widespread destruction and a fragile truce that seems to be holding for now. This is the Gaza Strip, one of the world's most densely populated areas. It is home to over 2.1 million people, people that have witnessed 4 wars since 2008. The latest flare-up was a stark reminder on how easily conflict can trigger a wider war here in the Strip. The truce comes 50 hours after the escalation began. On Friday last week, Israel launched its operation in Gaza. It began with a strike on a leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Israel said the attacks were in response to threats from the group. It came days after Israel arrested a senior PIJ member in West Bank. The Islamic Jihad responded to this by firing hundreds of rockets into Israel. However, most of these rockets were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome system. According to Israel, 1,100 projectiles were fired from the Gaza Strip. 200 of them are said to have landed inside Gaza. A second senior Islamic Jihad leader, Khaled Mansour, was killed by Israel on Saturday. By Sunday, the violence had escalated. 46 Palestinians were killed, including 15 children. Gaza blamed Israeli aggression for the violence, while Israel said it was only hitting Palestinian Islamic Jihad targets. The escalation was the worst that the Strip has seen in the last 15 months. Especially since the 11-day war that Israel and Hamas fought in May last year.
The house was overcrowded with no less than 22 members, and around it there were 6 houses that were all damaged, and this happened without a warning.
The Palestinian Islamic Jihad was founded in 1981 by Palestinian students in Egypt. Their main aim was to establish a Palestinian state in the West Bank. The group is allied with the Hamas. Both of them have a background in the Muslim Brotherhood and want an Islamic Palestinian state. But the PIJ is vastly outnumbered by the Hamas. The PIJ has been designated as a terror group by the West, but unlike the Hamas, the PIJ has refused to join elections. It also has no ambition to form a government in Gaza or West Bank. The group is also heavily funded by Iran, just like Hamas. Israel's explicit focus on attacking the PIJ seemed almost intentional. Many say it was intended to convince Hamas to stay out of the fighting. Others state significant disagreements between the PIJ and the Hamas. This latest clash almost looked like a prelude to the previous Gaza wars. Though Hamas managed to stay out of this conflict, the fighting came to an end on Sunday after a ceasefire mediated by Egypt. Egypt has often been a crucial stakeholder in Gaza, mediating previous truces between the Jewish state and Hamas. Both Israel and Hamas thanked Egypt for brokering the ceasefire, while both sides call the operation a success.
The enemy aimed to break Islamic Jihad, but we didn't break. On the contrary, we made an achievement and we forced the conditions that we started the battle for with the enemy. This is how simple the deal was, and the achievement is clear.
Celebrations broke out in the Strip after the ceasefire announcement. For now, both sides have agreed to the truce. But the situation continues to remain fragile. As for Israel, many are calling this a political gamble by Yair Lapid, one that seems to have paid off. Lapid took a gamble by launching the preemptive strike. What he counted on was Hamas staying out of the fight. This would allow Israel to weaken the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. While avoiding a full-blown escalation in the Strip, throughout the fighting, Lapid too refrained from mentioning Hamas. At the same time, this short military campaign has won him some political points at home.
The action in Gaza today was in the face of concrete threats that disrupted the routine of life in the south. Israel is not interested in a broad campaign in Gaza, but neither is it afraid of it.
Yair Lapid lacks the security credentials that Israelis often seek in their leaders. For him, this was a glaring weakness ahead of the November elections, especially since he was facing off against Netanyahu. The former prime minister is known to be a security hawk. But this recent operation could help him gain political ground ahead of the polls. Who knows, it might even end up winning him the elections. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
From Palestine to Lebanon and Turkey, we have a lot more lined up for you in this edition of the West Asia Post. But first, let's take a quick look at what else is making the headlines across West Asia.
U.S. accuses Iranian operative of plotting to kill John Bolton. The Justice Department says the IRGC member offered $300,000 to assassinate Donald Trump's former national security advisor. Russia has launched an Iranian satellite into space from the Kazakhstan base. The launch signals the beginning of strategic cooperation between the two countries in space. A Palestinian prisoner on a protracted hunger strike was moved from an Israeli jail to a hospital because of his worsening condition. Awavdeh has refused food for just over 160 days, according to his family. Historic buildings collapse in Yemen's Sana'a after heavy rains. Houthi officials say 10 buildings have been destroyed in the capital's old city, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Some of the world's most prized works of contemporary Western art have been unveiled for the first time in decades in Tehran. These artworks were part of Iran's Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi's multi-billion-dollar collection in the late 1970s. This year's FIFA World Cup in Qatar is set to kick off a day earlier than scheduled. Multiple reports now suggest that hosts Qatar will play the tournament opener against Ecuador on the 20th of November.
Here in Beirut, an armed gunman held 6 people hostages. This happened in a commercial bank in the Lebanese capital. The gunman wanted to withdraw his own money. His money, his savings, are trapped in the bank. Now, since 2019, Lebanese banks have imposed a cap on withdrawal. This was due to the crippling economic crisis. So, this is not the first time that this has happened in Lebanon, and it's likely not to be the last.
It looked like a scene out of some Hollywood thriller. An armed gunman, bank employees held hostage, shots being fired, police standing outside the doors, and people trying to negotiate with the gunman. Except this was playing out in a neighborhood in Beirut. Bassam al-Sheikh Hussein entered the Federal Bank of Lebanon branch just before noon. This was located in the Hamra neighborhood of West Beirut. He had a firearm with him. This brings us to the twist in the story. What the 42-year-old demanded was money from his own account. He did not want to loot the bank. He just wanted his own money. Lebanon's crippling economic crisis means that there is a cap on how much you can withdraw from banks. Bassam wanted to access around $200,000, money that he had in his bank account. When the employee refused the request, he began screaming. The 42-year-old said his relatives were in the hospital. Then he pulled out the gun. Some bank customers managed to flee. This was before he shut the doors on the rest. Soon, one elderly man was released from the bank. The remaining 6 hostages remained inside. This included a customer and 5 bank employees. Police were immediately deployed outside the bank. There was even an ambulance nearby. 2 people were seen negotiating with the armed man. He replied angrily to both of them, wielding the rifle in one hand and a cigarette in the other. The suspect later released 2 hostages. The hostage standoff finally ended after 6 hours. This was when the bank agreed to give the man around $30,000. The suspect turned himself in as soon as the bank promised him money.
What happened is that one of the depositors came to the bank and held hostage all the employees and some bank clients. What I can say is that all the files are at the hands of the judiciary.
This is not the first time this has happened in Lebanon. The country is going through a crippling economic crisis. Lebanese banks have limited withdrawals of hard currency. They say they make exceptions for humanitarian cases, but such exemptions are very rare. To Lebanon citizens, the man was a hero, one that was fighting for his own rights.
In Lebanon, since 2019, people have been suffering, standing in queues to receive $50 every 2 weeks from their own hard-earned money and savings. So the support for Bassam was spontaneous. One heard chants of "You are a hero," even during the hostage situation. In Lebanon, rich people became poor overnight and shady deals were made to withdraw dollars from banks. So Bassam was not the first one. Fortunately, this time there were no injuries. But this just may not be the last time you hear such news from Lebanon. Ghadi Francis for WION. World is one. World powers are back again in Vienna. The European Union has presented its final text. Iran says it is studying the document. Now, a revived nuclear deal could send oil prices tumbling. 100 million barrels of oil could enter the market every day. So, is Tehran willing to finally sign this final text? And will the world powers finally salvage the Iran nuclear deal? We tell you.
The Iran nuclear deal has seen a lot, but countries in Vienna are still scrambling to save it. This time, the talks have entered a critical stage. The European Union has presented its final text. The EU says the text is non-negotiable. In a tweet by the EU Foreign Policy Chief, Josep Borrell, this is what he had to say. What can be negotiated has been negotiated, and it's now in a final text. End of quote. The draft was met with guarded optimism in Iran. Tehran says it was examining the 25-page document. But many involved in the deal remain optimistic. They say a deal is within reach, even with all the hurdles.
There are around 4 to 5 technical issues that are still open and that are in the process of being finalized. Some of the most thorny issues have actually been resolved. One of them has been the Iranian demand to delist the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to remove them from the foreign terrorist list in the United States. Iran has, according to this official, agreed to set aside this demand for the moment.
Iranian reports suggest that an International Atomic Energy Agency probe is a key sticking point. But Europe says it has nothing to do with the JCPOA. On Sunday, Tehran said the IAEA should completely resolve the issues, especially those related to questions over nuclear material at its undeclared sites. If the United States and Iran revive the deal, 1 million barrels of oil per day could enter the market, one that could help relieve the global energy crisis. Currently, Iran cannot sell its oil on the global market, but if a deal is reached, it will allow Tehran to do so. So any deal will be a major victory for Europe, especially as it faces a potential emergency this winter.
This is a game. This shows that Americans and Europeans plan to revive the deal, have Iranian oil in the market for about 6 months, and after the cold season, they come back again with new allegations by the IAEA.
For now, what is needed to reach an agreement in Vienna is a realistic view of the talks. For both sides, keeping the window of diplomacy open is the best option. So that's where things stand right now. America and Iran want to seal the deal. Europe needs it desperately. So there's a need to salvage the historic JCPOA. But it's rarely as easy with a baggage of decades-old mistrust and hatred. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
And now to Turkey. Istanbul is a historic megalopolis of 16 million residents. It is not normally thought of as a beach resort. But more and more residents are going to the beach there because you can swim between 2 continents and 2 seas. And because of the Turkish crippling economic crisis, now vacations are way too expensive. So the beach is their only escape.
Istanbul, a bustling megalopolis of 16 million people. The city is unique. It lies between 2 continents and 2 seas. However, Istanbul does not immediately strike you as a beach resort. That is more like Antalya or Bodrum. But for its locals, Istanbul's beaches are a source of escape. Earlier, you could access the water anywhere. Now, of course, you have buildings everywhere. The coastline has changed.
I think it's a privilege to swim in Istanbul because you enter the sea between 2 continents. From here, when I'm in the water, I look towards Europe and the opposite side towards Asia. This does not exist anywhere else in the world.
This summer, the officials have added 100 extra sun lounges to Kakmakçi Beach, creating room for 300 people under 170 parasols. This year, attendance has shot up at the beach. A large part of the spike stems from Turkey's economic crisis, one that has seen consumer prices soar by 80% in 1 year.
I have never seen such a crowd as there is this year. People have difficulty finding deck chairs. Even the city hall did not anticipate it. People don't have money. They can't go on a vacation. We are in an economic crisis, an economic depression.
Istanbul has 85 accessible beaches or bathing spots. This is in between the Black Sea in the north, the Sea of Marmara in the south, and the Bosphorus Strait in between. Some beaches are very public, the others private. Some attract a more traditional clientele, while others come out in bikinis and swim trunks. Like the Turkish society itself, the two often share the same space.
But for a gigantic city like Istanbul, a sea like this is not bad. From 10 a.m., the residents are there to enjoy it. It's immediately full. Our sea is beautiful, yes.
Finally, there are the bathers of Bosphorus, those who swim between Europe and Asia. Under the serene gaze of the city's grand palaces. These are not tourists. They are residents who've been swimming here since childhood. Swimming in the Bosphorus is tricky, especially with currents that can swiftly sweep you away. Istanbul has always had a beach culture, but many believe Erdogan's party is purposely restricting bathing space in the city, layering shores with construction and cement. But the citizens are not giving up. They are continuing with their own rituals, swimming and returning home on the metro with salty skin and sand stuck to their sandals. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Muslims across West Asia mark the day of Ashura. It is the 10th day of the holy month of Muharram. For Shiite Muslims, the day commemorates the 17th century martyrdom of Imam Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, in the Battle of Karbala.
This is a continuation of a historic legacy which originated in Hindaya city in Karbala on the morning of the 10th of Muharram, which was passed on to generations of Iraqi Shiites.
The Yemeni people are rallying today to support the resistant Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip who are being brutally attacked by the barbaric aggression of the forces of evil and the Israeli occupation.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe. I am Ghadi Francis, and you're watching WION World is One.